I hesitated when I saw that the elevator I was trying to get on was already occupied. More so when I saw who was occupying it, and thought that maybe I should just wait for it to come back up again. Better to wait a little than go plunging to the bottom, just because some guy couldn't keep his grubby little fingers off a burger or 10. I know I should have waited, but impatience had always been one of my vices. So I breathed a loud sigh and squeezed past the big guy onto the elevator, praying that we don't end up falling to the bottom. He at least had the good grace to look sheepish and apologize, as he saw that I was tightly packed into a corner in the back of the tiny lift. Just my luck, being tracked with Hurley from Lost on this pint-sized elevator. "Headed for the ground floor?" he asked. I nodded. "Me too," he added, and then turned around as sweat began to pour down his face. Good. At least I won't have to reach around his large frame to try and press the button for the ground floor. The elevator creaked and groaned in discomfort as it began its descent, and I immediately grabbed the railings on its walls, holding on for dear life. It made a reluctant ding sound as it passed the 10th floor. "A rickety old thing, isn't it?" I asked with a nervous laugh. "Tell me something I don't know," he replied, equally nervous. "You live here?" I asked him. "I've never seen you before." He shook his head. "No, just a visitor." I nodded and then waited in silence for him to continue our awkward small talk, but he didn't oblige me. Not in the mood for it, apparently. You know what, it doesn't even matter. Just 7 more floors to go. I wasn't going through our little journey in peace and quiet though. For soon, his arms started twitching, and his right leg began to shake as we cleared floor after floor in complete silence. I saw that he was sweating heavily, and he was also breathing pretty heavily too. "You okay there, buddy?" I asked with trepidation. I didn't need this guy getting sick of me. "No." His eyes widened, and his cheeks puffed up as he quickly covered his mouth with his hand. "Oh no," I thought. "Not that." He barfed all over the floor. "Jesus Christ," I screamed as the liquid touched my new shoes. "Sorry," he groaned, and then his body convulsed before he hurled again, projectiling on the elevator door, splashing the 5th floor through the slight crack in the middle. Crap, how much can one guy throw up? My feet made a disgusting, squishy sound every time I tried moving, but I crinkled my nose, tightened my gut, and moved to pat him on his wet back. "You okay?" I asked. "Yes," he coughed. "I'm so sorry. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before." Life is full of new experiences, isn't it? I smiled as I helped him lean against the wall. I would find out just how true that was, right in the next second, as the elevator stopped in its tracks between the 2nd and 1st floors with a loud bang. The lights went out, and we were thrown into complete darkness. Great, just what I needed. "That's not good," he spoke softly. "No, it isn't. What the heck happened?" I took up my phone. No signal. Of course. I banged on the door angrily before stumbling around and looking for the emergency phone. If I stayed here any longer, It's going to the contents of my stomach that will be splattered on the floor next. Help me look for the thing, I growled. Look for what? He asked, confused. The phone, man, the frickin' phone, I shouted. Do you want to be stuck in here? He shrank at my loud voice, at least as much as he could, but then began helping me. We must have looked around in the dark for a solid 2 minutes or so, before my left hand had found it, high up on the wall. Why would anybody place it so high up? I took out the receiver and placed it next to my ear. Nothing. No dial tone. The thing's dead. I spat and slammed the thing down. They'll find us. The maintenance guys, he stammered. It shouldn't take too long. I nodded. Fingers crossed, huh? My nose crinkled as a vile and putrid stench assaulted my senses, overpowering the smell of the throw-up, swishing and swirling on the floor. What was that? It was nauseating, like hydrogen sulfide from a coal mine. I took out my handkerchief and put it up on my nose, trying to use it as a gas mask to protect myself from the poisonous fumes. Sorry, he spoke guiltily. I groaned. Dang this guy. He keeps discharging effluents from every orifice of his body, like a poorly regulated factory. He proceeded to prove me right by belching loudly. Mouth, butt, and then mouth again. Who wants to bet on what place he's going to use next? So, I'm Steve, I said in a nasally voice, pinching my nose tightly. What's yours? Screw it. I'll small talk the stench away, or at least try to keep my mind off it, for I certainly didn't want to add to the poisonous cocktail brewing in this tiny little space. Oh, wow, he squeaked. What a small world. I didn't hear what he had to say, because the lights came on suddenly, and the elevator began to move again with an obnoxiously loud moan. I breathed a sigh of relief. Just a couple of floors to go. We watched in tense silence as the elevator gradually made its way downstairs, the soft dinging reminding us that we had descended a floor, and then another. Ground floor. I stood up straight, preparing to find the exit this pigsty, when the elevator lurched and moved downwards once again. Oh, crap. You pressed the button for the ground floor, right? I asked skeptically. Yeah, I swear I did, he replied defensively. I looked at the button panel. None of the buttons were lit up. I rolled my eyes. Of course, he didn't press it correctly. Now we're gonna go all the way down to the end of the basement parking, 3 floors down, before we can come up again. Screw that. I decided to leave the elevator and use these stairs to come back up again. No way was I spending a second more than I had to in this place. I coughed and my eyes began to water as the smell got worse. I'm really sorry, man, he began. It's okay. I cut him off sharply. Just stop talking, please. Ding, ding, ding. We had finally reached the bottom of this building. Finally, this ordeal comes to an end. I smiled a little as I imagined the reaction of the person waiting for us on the other side. That kid from The Shining, seeing the twin sisters and a flood of crimson come gushing at him, had a better experience than what awaits this person. To my utter shock, the elevator didn't stop. It kept on descending. "What the heck?" I yelled. "Maybe there's another basement," he offered. "Or maybe they installed another one." "You just can't build another basement, you idiot," I screamed. "Well, you can. It's just very expensive," he pointed out. "In a freaking apartment building, without the residents finding out." I looked at him incredulously. His head was thicker than his body. "That can't be good," he said, his voice showing fear now. I looked at the display panel. It was showing -5 this time, and we were still descending. I could feel the hair on my arm stand up as I realized that we were officially in the frickin' Twilight Zone right now. What in the ever-loving heck? "You think it's a glitch?" he asked. My breath quickened in anger, frustration, and fear. A glitch? Really? The machinery got a little messed up and out of place, so it decided to dig into the ground and drag us to the center of the earth, right? Can't you feel the elevator moving? There is no glitch. The elevator continued to pick up speed, clearing floor after floor at a rapid pace now. My heart began to pound, with sweat pouring down my brow, as I held onto the railing so tightly my knuckles were turning white. "Oh God, oh God, oh God," he whimpered. "I don't want to die." I closed my eyes shut, clenched my teeth, and waited for all of this, whatever it was, to end. The elevator began shaking violently, and I feared it would break apart, sending us falling down to whatever fate had in store for us down there. I felt a sharp pain in my sides as he fell onto me, and the railing painfully dug into my ribs. 3 more dings. The numbers were going by in the blink of an eye as we traveled at the speed of a monorail. I pushed him aside, taking in deep breaths as my lungs expanded in relief. I then got down and curled up into a corner, the vomit staining my clothing. But I wasn't even paying attention to that, as my fear had long overridden my disgust. The lift slowed down with a jerk, but it didn't stop moving. I opened my eyes slowly, and I looked around. -100. I froze when I saw that number. How deep were we? How is this even possible? I rubbed my eyes and I looked at it again. Yup, we were 100 floors down, and this thing was still moving. I'd always considered myself to be a non-believer, but that was fast changing now. I began sobbing like a baby, a grown man bawling loudly. Please, let this end. When I saw him, I right about peed myself. He was sitting on the floor to my right, staring off into the distance lifelessly. Shivers ran down my spine as I realized that he might have died. Stealing my nerves, I waded through the liquid and crawled over to him, mindful of the dinging as we kept on moving downwards. No pulse, no heartbeat. He was gone. Was it the shock that got him? I don't know. But I knew that my sole companion was now dead, and that I was trapped in an ever-descending elevator with a body. I put my head in my hands, pulled my hair, and began crying harder. You must be thinking that it couldn't get any worse than that, right? Oh, it did. It escalated beyond my imagination as the body's hand shot out and caught my arm in a vice-like grip. I screamed in fright and then began shaking my arm violently to free myself, but he was way too strong. His face was trembling, his pupils dancing around in his eyes erratically. I watched in terrifying silence as his tongue flopped out and hung loosely on his chin, as his head kept on shaking. I put my legs against the walls and pushed, trying to use the recoil to free myself, but to no avail. His cheeks began to puff up, his arms swelled, and I finally freed myself, crashing into the opposite wall. Ding. -150. I looked at him in fascination. Was he growing bigger, or were my eyes deceiving me? No, I wasn't wrong. He was blowing up like a balloon, growing larger and larger, his head hitting the ceiling gently. Oh no. How much bigger was he going to get? I jumped to the corner farthest from him, as he kept on expanding, covering more and more of the lift. Soon, his bulging stomach pressed against my body, and I took a deep breath, not knowing when I'll get the chance to breathe again, if at all. I felt myself fading away as the pressure got worse and worse, and the last thought I had was what a strange way to die this was. The next thing I remember is tasting coppery liquid on my tongue. I spat the offending substance out and tried to open my eyes. Almost immediately, the pain in my head started to register. It was pulsating like someone was beating on my skull with a hammer. I blinked my eyes open and cleared my vision. My heart sank and I realized I was still in the elevator, which was still moving downwards. And I was lying in a pool of red ooze. I turned my head around, and a sharp pain shot up through my neck, making me regret trying to move. Ding. Holy crap. Everything was covered. The floor, the walls, the ceiling. It looked like something had exploded here, like a giant balloon of red. I almost threw up when I thought what that something could be. My suspicions were confirmed when I saw what looked like intestines hanging from the tiny fan embedded in the ceiling. Those weren't the only traces left of him. I noticed other parts, some floating in the now ankle-deep pool of liquid. This was when I lost control over my guts and added to the little art installation at my feet. Not knowing what else to do, I tried using the phone again after I had calmed down a bit, but it still seemed not to be working, and I had almost put it back down when I heard it. This soft, gentle crying that was somehow the scariest thing this night, even worse than everything that had happened until now. The voice was barely audible, as if coming from a large distance, yet it felt like it was right next to my ears, clear as day, the strange contradiction threatening to rip my mind apart. It was a weeping baby, crying out for God knows what, the sound shredding my soul to pieces. What was that? I wanted to put the phone down and run as far away as possible, but I stood rooted to the spot as the same sound replayed again and again, as if on a loop. I felt something tugging at my pants. I looked down and saw the baby with an abnormally large head trying to crawl up my leg. His mouth opened and I heard it crying, but it was strange because the crying was coming from the phone and not this thing hanging from my shin. Have you ever been so terrified that your body just shuts down and refuses to listen to the commands your brain is desperately screaming at it? Because that is how I felt at that moment. I couldn't do anything as it crawled all the way up to my knees. It snarled, its face deforming into a hateful expression, and the spell was broken with my fight or flight response kicking in. I shook my leg frantically, trying to get it off of me. Finally, the thing slid off, letting out a painful, low-pitched, almost demonic cry. I hesitated before I walked over to that thing full of rage, and finally shook it off of me, throwing it into the wall. I collapsed onto my knees and cried once again. My heart was thumping, and my hands and legs were shaking like crazy. It felt like I was going to come apart. Why like this? I don't know why this is happening to me, or when this is going to end, if at all. I just felt the need to write this down, to have someone know what exactly I've gone through. I don't even know if this is going to show up or not, but I know that I have to try, because I have a feeling I won't be able to contact anyone ever again, as this elevator is soon going to reach floor 666.